How many film festivals did you submit Death Cipher to?
I probably submitted to about 40.
And you paid submission fees
I
for
did pay submission
all
fees, yeah.
40?
It was about, I mean, I think it was about $1,000 when it was all said and done. So it was a lot of money, you know. That wasn't part of the budget, you know. It just kind of, you know, that was on top of, you know, some of that. So.
Were these all local festivals? Were you hoping to travel to them?
I tried to submit to like every level. I submitted to some big festivals like Sundance and South by Southwest, but then I submitted to some more attainable. I went like, you know, top tier. I went second tier, and then I even submitted to like just like whatever I could find that like even some with free fees. Like I really tried to get out there and find different levels to see, you know, just to see what, you know, what was feasible for the film.
So you're kind of combing through Film Freeway or different
Yes,
places
exactly.
to see?
Film Freeway, just looking through, I mean, I spent so many different times getting on for like hours looking through all the festivals and seeing what might fit timeline-wise, what was in budget. It was a lot of time spent submitting to festivals for sure.
What were the results?
I think I only got into about like 2 festivals. So it was a very, you know, marginal like result compared to how many I submitted to.
So out of 40, 2 said, "You're our guy."
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did you plan on going to those festivals and having like a Q&A?
I think if I'd gotten into a certain one that was like, if it was close enough, I definitely would have gone to some of them for sure. I mean, just that experience would have been, you know, I think that's part of it is going and seeing people watch it, you know, would be a great experience.
Oh yeah, and then having the audience ask questions. Did the film festivals care or know that you had a $4,000 budget?
I think some of them did and some of them didn't. I did reach out to a few and try to get some feedback, and it seemed like some of them just weren't even, like it was almost a blind process. So then you're kind of going up against films with much larger budgets in that scenario. And you know, at that point, it's like I might not be able to compete in that sense. And I think part of my selling point was like, hey, we made this for $4,000. This is like the indiest of indie films. Like we deserve to be in your festival because of that. And so that was sort of my pitch. But I think at the same time, there are so many films out there being made, so many films being submitted, and every festival has sort of a different program it's looking for. And so you may or may not fit that program. They may or may not have even enough schedule in there for that many films, you know, because some of them, like I got high marks, but it was just, you know, it's a choice between this or another film that had just a little bit more going for it, you know, and so it's a challenge it's a numbers game, you know, but it also is just, there's just so much competition, and it might not even come down to quality.
Were you able to check the analytics? Did they watch the movie? I mean, were you able to track it?
Because I reached out directly to some to try to get some feedback, and it sounded like some of them did watch a good portion of the film, but for the others, there were some festivals where I don't even know if they considered the submission, just because I could see on Film Freeway where like either it got accepted or not, but then some of them, the status never changed. So I don't even know what happened there, if they ever considered it or what. So that was for a lot of times smaller festivals. A lot of the bigger festivals were very communicative or were very quick to say, okay, yes, you got in, or yes, no, you didn't. And so it just seemed like because there's so many festivals of varying sizes, you just don't know what kind of, you know, volunteer force they have to be able to watch or even give feedback or consider. So.
What did you learn about submitting to film festivals?
I think it's really important to build out your social media presence like as far in advance as you can. I think a lot of festivals look at that and consider that when thinking about whether to accept you or not. And I don't even know if it necessarily matters that you have like 10,000 followers or what. I think they just want to know that if they pick you, that you're going to be posting about it, and there's going to be at least some sort of fanfare around you coming to the festival, so that they know, okay, like we've picked this person, they're going to post about it. That's free marketing for us. That helps, you know. And some festivals don't necessarily need that, but some of the, lower festivals, that might be really important to them. And so if it's the choice between, let's say your film is really great and there's another film that's also great, but the only difference is they have a better social media presence, they're probably going to pick that one.
Right. Or two, it might have other filmmakers see it and go, ooh, you know what? I'm going to look up that film festival.
Exactly.
I can't make it, but I want to get my submission
and
there.
It brings attention, and I think that's what the value of social media for filmmakers is like. You can kind of direct eyeballs towards your content, and festivals, distributors, everyone's looking at that now. It's a big part of it.
Well, you have a TikTok for Death Cipher. That's under the name of one of the characters, I believe.
Yes, yeah.
There's only a few videos on there, but do you have anything else? Just Facebook or Twitter?
I have it, yeah, YouTube, Instagram. We kind of try to do everything, and some of it was an experiment. I was trying to experiment and see, okay, where am I getting the most traction? And we did TikTok a little bit. It wasn't quite taking off, and honestly, the time to commit to that with everything else I'm doing as a one-man band. I kind of am just having to make choices, like hard choices. Okay, I did TikTok a little bit, didn't quite take off. Let me keep doing YouTube, let me try Facebook, and then whatever kind of works, at least in the immediate. If maybe I had enough time, I'd do all of them, and maybe doing 50 videos on TikTok would lead to a little more traction. But, I think time is the most valuable resource for a filmmaker like me. So I'm like, okay, what works, what doesn't, I'll follow with what works,
But you regret that you didn't build it out more before
submitting? Yeah, I think were I to do it again, and for the next project, I would start posting like while we're filming, I think starting to build that presence, doing a little more BTS stuff. We had a different marketing plan in place for Death Cipher. I wanted to actually go down more of a mystery route, do more puzzles and stuff. But as we got to the distribution phase, I realized like, oh, we actually just need to be more traditional because we just need to get people directly to the Tubi link so people will click on it. And so I kind of actually had to change. I mean, we spent almost a year planning this very expansive, complicated marketing thing, but then it was like people would go to this puzzle over here, but then they'd never quite arrive at the Tubi link. So it's too many steps, and so we had to like simplify. And I think some of it's because of the level that we're at. Like if we were a bigger film with a studio behind us or a marketing firm behind us that could kind of enact that in a more expansive way with more people involved, I think it could be a little more successful. But part of this is okay. Like I'm just one person. What can I do to get as many people directly to the film as possible? And that's kind of been where I found probably the most success with this.
Of the 40 film festivals that you submitted Death Cipher to, how many did you have a personal connection with?
Probably 2 or 3. One of those personal connections I really thought would help, but then I ended up not getting into the festival, which surprised me at the time. But I also understand that like there's a lot of factors that go into that. One of them, I reached out to my contact with the festival. We had a really positive conversation. It seemed really well, but then they ended up leaving the festival before. So like it's like now I don't have that contact there anymore. So it really never panned out. So some of it was just kind of luck of the draw, and But I would say I think having personal connections I think personal contacts always go a long way with any of this stuff. A lot of the stories I see where someone has really especially on the distribution side, they know someone that kind of has connections in the distribution world. They reach out to that person connects them, introduces them, that opens up a bunch of doors. So like knowing people or meeting people and then having them introduce you to people, it really is there is a personal side to the business that you really need to do your best to take advantage of.
What are your thoughts about renting a theater yourself instead of pursuing film festivals? Did you look into that?
I did look into it. For the budget I'm at, it was kind of expensive. I reached out to several theaters, but it was cost prohibitive. I do think there is something to that, or people finding ways to get maybe a limited run in a theater. that can be valuable. I don't think theatrical is necessarily dead. I think the way sometimes people talk about distribution and like it's all streaming or YouTube and for an indie low budget, no budget, like theatrical sometimes can be difficult and maybe not the best option. But I've also seen films that have, they get in a few theaters and then it does well, and then all of a sudden then that expands, and it's a little slower growth, but then they're able to build up into maybe even a few hundred theaters. I think you saw something with Markiplier for Iron Lung, that film recently. Like he built his own YouTube base. I mean, he's a huge YouTuber, so he had a built-in fan base. He went to a theater. I think they got maybe a couple hundred, and then all of a sudden he's in 2,500 theaters nationwide, and he made like 3 times his budget back on the first day.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how common that is. I mean, he does have a huge
it's not
audience.
common.
Yeah.
But I think there's something there where if you could recreate that on a smaller level, let's say you're a really small filmmaker, you go to like a local theater chain. You say, hey, could you show me for a few days or over a weekend? Well, if you had some success and you were able to push that, and then suddenly they made a little bit of money, well, maybe they expand it, And so I'm not saying that's going to work for everyone or even anyone, but if you try that and it's successful, then it was worth it. If you tried and it's not successful, at least you tried it, okay, maybe that's not the best option for this film. And so I think trying to maybe be open to whatever works and trying to find different ways to get your film out there, at least in the attempt, you can discover what's best for your film, because every film's different, and some films have a draw to theater even though they're made for a really low budget. And I think you've seen that with a few films recently where they were able to get into theaters, and then they were able to actually grow into like almost a nationwide expansion. And they're films you would never think of. They don't have any stars, they don't have any known quantities, but they're able to build up to that. And so there's something there that I think is worth exploring, even if you're at a lower level. At least maybe look into it, do some research, and maybe there's something there that could pop off for you, especially if you know someone in that world who could make some introductions.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Did you try anyone in Mississippi that might have been where they could kind of be like local boy makes good and get press there?
That was not really something we did. I looked into it, but I think at the time it felt like I'd need to go and physically maybe do some of that work to kind of get it to work out, and I just didn't have the time. So like some of it's just a limitation for me, but I think there's an opportunity there especially if you live in a smaller town. If you're not in LA and you live like in Ohio or somewhere, I think there's a lot of opportunity to step out and say, hey, go to a local theater chain, and there's probably a lot more openness because in LA, everyone's a filmmaker. So everyone's going to these places and asking, every restaurant's had someone come in and say, hey, can I film here, But if you're in a place where there's not as much filming, I think there's actually more opportunity.
Yeah, and I always see the local news channels from a small town somewhere in the Midwest or the South, whatever, picking up these stories of, oh, this person went to LA, because it is exciting to the outside world to hear. In LA, we're so used to it. But yeah, sometimes you have to kind of go back home to get some exposure as well. So, just a thought.
Yeah.
On your next movie, will you do anything different aside from sort of beef up the social media in terms of getting into film festivals?
Yeah, I think I think I'm gonna probably attempt to do way more on the front end. I think thinking about the distribution before you even make the film is important. It's not putting the cart before the horse, because if you make the film and then it doesn't go anywhere, then why did you make it? And sometimes, depending on what film it is, like for me, Cipher, if it didn't even go anywhere, like it was an accomplishment for me because I made it, But for this next film, my goal is to grow, to build, to get to that next level, to take the next step, whatever that is. And so the goal would be to maybe even try to get a little bit of interest in distribution, like before the film's even shot, right? And now because I have a feature film, the great thing about this is I can go, hey, I already made a film. I made it for $4,000. If you give me a little bit more money, let's do the next thing, right? So there's some power in already having done something for however small a budget. And I've seen that with other people I know, other filmmakers, where they hit these, closed doors and finally just said, okay, I'm just gonna make something. And then suddenly all the doors open because you did it and then said, okay, give me some money. Whereas if you're a filmmaker that's never made anything and you say, hey, give me some money, I can do this. Well, where's the proof? And that is, frustrating if you're the filmmaker, because you know you can do it. You have this thing inside you. You can see the script. You can see it in your mind. And if you just have the resources, you can make it. But sometimes you might have to go maybe make something a little bit smaller, do something like maybe that is you can just accomplish right now, and then use that to pitch for the next thing.
Looking back on it now, do you have any regrets about making your first feature film without putting too much thought into distribution?
I think my plan, the way I thought about it was, okay, I'll try to get into a festival. If I can get into a decent enough festival, that'll be some leverage for distribution. If that doesn't work, maybe I'll try to go around to a few distributors and see if someone will accept me. If that doesn't work, I can always just put it on Film Hub and try to get out that way. So I feel like I kind of always had this fail-safe. If nothing else, I could try this. I mean, honestly, even if that didn't work, I could put it on YouTube. I mean, that's something that people are doing even right now and seeing a lot of success. So there's really so many options, and just because a distributor doesn't pick you up doesn't mean your film is bad or it's not worthy. It just means you need to find the right fit for you. And I think as I went around to some of the distributors to try to pitch, it was, and a lot of this was over email. It was like I'm just sending it out, trying to see who might buy it. But I think it's important to offer them something. I think a lot of times when you do a lot of these pitches, you're like, okay, please pick up my film, please make my film, please help me as a poor, broke filmmaker. But like, if you're not offering them something, then why would they pick up your film? And a lot of times the film itself isn't always a selling point. Sometimes it's okay, I'm a filmmaker doing this. Here's my story. You see a lot of YouTubers doing that where they're leveraging their audience to get distribution. But what if you're me and you don't have an audience, right? Well, there are other things. I think one of the pitches we tried was like our marketing. We were trying to we have this really creative marketing approach that could be really interesting. And that was kind of always our pitch. And that story of like we made this for $4,000, Were I to do it again, I think I would try to find more specific direct contacts that would be interested in the story that I'm selling. I think I kind of went broad and we're reaching out to companies. Maybe what I would do differently is try to reach out directly to people and find specific people. I did that a little bit, but I think even like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of who you know. That's always been the thing, right? And so finding some specific people who might be interested and could buy into your story and help you. And sometimes you see these filmmakers where they're trying to make a film, and so they get a big actor to be the star, and like that he or she becomes the driving force to kind of, okay, I give my blessing to these kids, I'm gonna be in the film, now give it money, right? But you could also do that on the distribution side. Find someone who has maybe a good reputation and have them get behind your film, come on as a producer, on the back end, and then that would be an opportunity to actually get a little more leverage in that process. And I think part of the reason I didn't do some of that is because, I just wanted to retain as much control even on the back end. I think I was a little bit worried about if, let's just say Cipher shot through the roof and made a bunch of money, like what am I gonna have to give away? Am I gonna have to give away 50% of that? 90%? Like what do you have to give in order to get the distribution deal that gets you, where you wanna go? So, some of that was by choice, and I think in the future, the lesson I would take is trying to maybe be a little more proactive on some of the personal level.
Right, and also too, it's a first feature, and so track records do speak volumes.
Right.
And so sometimes it's nothing you've done. It's just, okay, this person made a great first film. What else does he have? Has he done other films that are features? So
no, that's a great point. And I think again that was always in the back of my mind too. That like I'm because it's $4,000. Like I can use this as my calling card for the next thing. And so I always try to keep that in mind, even with some of the festival rejections and some of that stuff, because that can be disheartening. But I also know, like, I have I've had friends who are like, man, you've made a feature film, dude. I'm jealous. And you get so lost in, okay, I've got to write the film, I've got to make it, I've got to get it distributed. Okay, now it's out. Now I've got to market it. And you forget, like, oh, I made a feature film. Like, this is out in the world. People can watch it on Tubi at any moment, and like that is something to celebrate. And sometimes it's hard as a filmmaker to stop and just celebrate the wins, right? And so there's this big win, and I want to celebrate it.
thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.